Ladies and gentlemen, K Kim here. Welcome to the daily update. Hope you guys had a good day trading today. Market is up a little bit here on the S&P, 0.6%. We did see much stronger move today on the Russell 2000, the small caps, and the banks, the financial sector. They're both up close to 2%. Nasdaq is flat. Dow is up about 1%. So something we've been talking about in the last couple of weeks that I like to see this sector rotation continuing to occur, and that's nice to see that today. And you know, because Nasdaq obviously had a great last 6-7 months of bullish run, and we are seeing the laggers such as small caps and the banks to catch up. And so we're seeing some of those indices to do really well today. Again, 2% on Russell 2000, 2% on the financial sector, and S&P obviously usually always kind of right in the middle, 0.6%, and NASDAQ flat today. And that's a good thing that the NASDAQ is flat, right? Because the NASDAQ made a huge run. We need NASDAQ to slow it down. We don't want NASDAQ to go up too much, too fast, right? It will be dangerous if that happens. This is how the market likes to prop itself up while these leading indices such as semiconductor and NASDAQ to kind of cool off. And we want to see small caps and the banks to catch up there. Dow caught up quite a bit already, and also the transport caught up. They were lagging heavily while the NASDAQ and the semiconductor was just racing to the upside. And so it's good to see them making a move here in the last couple of weeks or last month or so. So let's continue with our analysis here on the S&P, right? I done a thorough long-term analysis over the weekend, looking at the S&P, Dow, NASDAQ, and other indices, including gold and Bitcoin. If you haven't watched it, you can check that out. I'll put that link at the end of this video. But let's continue with our daily analysis here, looking at S&P 65-minute chart. So it looks like we actually saw a decent gap up this morning. It looks like we gapped up 0.5%. That's a pretty decent gap up here, right? Because I mean, despite the fact that it's just because of the way the market closed on Friday, right? So I think a lot of people are expecting it to continue to the downside. So I think it kind of made a lot of bears surprised when we saw a gap up. So what happened was this thing actually gapped up here, and it looks like I wasn't watching this morning, so it looks like it got up right away quite a bit here. I mean, you know, let me double check, because sometimes with the spider, you know, some of that print might not be organic. So let's see. So this is the S&P 500 index. Cash market area, that's actual index, not ETF. So it looks like we did see that ramp on the first hour. So sometimes you get that kind of a weird print on Spider once in a while. So I just want to check that, make sure this print is there. So it looks like we did see that ramp clearing above this resistance there. And then all of a sudden out of nowhere, we see a sell-off, and that thing continued lower, kept coming lower, and come all the way back down to 355. So what a big fluctuation in the first hour. So I mean, the first hour we went all the way up to what? Almost 1% gain, came all the way back down to negative 0.8% fluctuation. And then looks like we kind of got back up here and formed this high wave doji, some crazy looking candle there on the first hour. And this is the reason why actually I don't like to look at first 2 hours. If you notice when I'm tweeting, you know, when I put out my tweets, usually it's in the midday, is because that's when the market is kind of quiet. And it kind of, once the market, because it's going to take about a couple hours, sets the tone of the market for the day. And then usually it's the third, fourth hour, you're going to kind of see where the market is headed. So that was the first 2 hours. Look at that volatility. Some crazy volatility we saw first 2 hours. We actually slightly even gotten below that strong support. Not strong, but I mean important support there, because that's pretty prominent support, because that's what we saw, you know, last week. We saw that level holding, right, on Thursday and Friday. We came back to it, and then this morning we bounced it, and so we came back. And there's a long lower wick here representing that at one point bears are trying to really push this thing down. So that was a first hour, second hour, third hour. It looks like we continued higher. We found support again at 355. Fourth hour continued, fifth hour continued, sixth hour came back up, and we just closed below this resistance there 3 times. There's a long upper wick there, right? Telling us that there was some of those attempts to make a move to the upside, but obviously it's going to close below it, just so it's going to make you guess what's going to happen tomorrow. So I'm going to put that line right here, 357. That will be important resistance going forward. So I'm looking at my short-term moving average here. My short-term moving average is starting to slightly move higher. Do you see this? So my short-term moving average is, because it was trading right here, it was hanging around here, and then we're starting to slightly move higher a little bit, and the price is getting above my short-term moving. It's for the longest time, actually. Let's zoom out a little bit. For the longest time, you see that my short-term moving average there, price below it, 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 price below it. Even first hour today, it closed below my short-term moving average. But on the 5th hour and the 6th hour, for the first time in about a week, we're trading above my short-term moving average. That's actually going to favor the buyers if the buyers can trade above 357.75 in the first 2 hours tomorrow. If we can see the buyers stay up for the first 2 hours, then at that time, you're going to see my short-term moving average start to find some confidence to the upside, right? Best case scenario, obviously, for the buyers is gapping it up, holding above 357.75 first 2 hours. Obviously, for the bears, you want to make sure buyers do not get above this pivot here, 357. That is the double bottom neckline we're dealing with right now. My short-term moving average is starting to kind of curl up a little bit here. You don't want to see that momentum going to the upside, because once this thing breaks out here and hold above 357.75, it's going to go after this gap right here at 362, 363. Let's zoom out a little bit. Let's look at this rising pivot here. So we're looking at more of a micro term earlier, right? Short to micro term. Now we're looking at a shorter term perspective. We've been tracking this rising pivot for how long now, right? We've been tracking this pretty much all throughout last 2-3 weeks, right? And I've noted that this is an important pivot. Why is this important pivot? Because first of all, well, that's where we see price fluctuation. But another thing that I talked about was every time when the price comes down and hit this level, somehow, some way, price gets up. 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 Somehow, some way, price is getting up today, right? And nobody knows if this level is going to break or we're going to move higher. But when you see certain levels are getting respected like this, you definitely want to be aware. And we want to give, obviously, man, anything can happen, but we want to give benefit of the doubt to the buyers, which we've been talking about in the short to midterm, right? And also, on Friday, I remember I was actually a little bit more neutral. I didn't want to give it bearish yet in the short term because of this pivot, actually, right? Despite the fact that it closed weak on Friday, but it still traded above my rising pivot. Not to mention, that's the level where we saw a gap, right? So that's an important pivot there. We got the gap area support. I talked about the best case scenario for the bears is gapping it down below 352. Turn this into an island top. If we see something like that, this thing is going to come back down to maybe 349, 348 to retest this gap. We didn't see a gap down. We saw a gap up. right? And that gave us some cushion. That's why that gap up was important, because there were some fluctuations in the first 2 hours today, this morning. What if we didn't see a gap down and then what if we didn't see a gap up and we saw this kind of volatility? This thing would have came down and filled this gap here. Remember what I talked about on Friday or Saturday is that it will be better for the buyers to continue with this momentum if this gap doesn't get filled. This gap is not fully filled. We filled almost halfway, but the gap still remains open right above that rising pivot. I think that's why we saw some momentum here. We're right on that 357.75 resistance, right on that neckline of potential double bottom here. Once we get above it and hold above it for 2 hours tomorrow, I believe that the market will continue to climb higher. So bears want to make sure we stay below it. This pivot right here, that resistance. Buyers want to make sure we stay above it, right? So in the micro term, we're looking a little bit more bullish, right? With the today's last 4 hours move. So micro term, we're dealing with the bullish, maybe bullish to neutral. Let's do bullish to neutral in the micro term. When I say micro term, I mean just the last couple days of trading session here. Just because we're still below this resistance, right? Until we can get above that, I want to be neutral to slightly bullish in the micro term. In the short term, I still want to be neutral to bullish. Not flat out neutral, but neutral to bullish, right? Half and half, right? Half neutral, half bullish, because we did see a little bit of a respecting this pivot price action today. Obviously, that short-term sentiment will turn to bullish once we close above 357.75, okay? Let's zoom out and look at the midterm here. So looking at the midterm, you can see this is a midterm price action, and we talked about that higher high here, and we're trying to figure out where is going to be that where is going to be that higher low. Is it going to be here? Is it going to be here? Right? That's what we're trying to figure out. If buyers can close above 357.75 tomorrow and hold above it tomorrow, there's a good chance this is going to be that higher low before this thing making new all-time highs, and then continuing to continue with that primary term uptrend, right? So that 357.75 is important level. Again, buyers, you want to gap it up, or at least a bullish strength in the first 2 hours, hold above it. Bears, make sure you don't let bulls get above it, because once bulls get above it, they're going to come up here and fill this gap. Let's check out that oscillator here. And also keep in mind, my midterm moving average is still rising. So despite the fact that with this whole time we saw some volatility, we never turned bearish or neutral in the midterm, right? Mainly because my midterm moving average continues to rise to the upside here, and price is staying above it, right? So midterm, we've been bullish this entire time ever since we saw price getting above my midterm moving average and the short term, and saw some of that momentum there, right? Let's check out that oscillator here. So oscillator actually just crossed up. You see that we just saw cross up. So what we talked about on Friday was that what we wanted to see is that bears bring, because we saw that cross to the downside. We wanted to see, not that we wanted to see, but for bears wanted to see this thing coming back down. And I also mentioned the fact that last time we saw something similar where we did see that cross, but what happened was bulls just got up here and crossed it back up here, and that's exactly what we're seeing last time when we saw that happening right there. Price was just right on that neckline also. Do you see this? So I'll end the video with this, but it's very important. You can see that right on that neckline, that's a double bottom right here. That's a double bottom right here. And that's a neckline right here, correct? Right on that neckline, you can see where my oscillator was right here. You can see where my oscillator is right here. Do you see it? We have a very similar price action here. So right now, only thing keeping this market from making new all-time highs is just right that 357.75 pivot. Tomorrow may be the day we know that this market is ready to go up and fill this gap here. Because that when this gap wasn't filled, things got hectic here, remember? For a week or so, and I told you guys that buyers must fill this gap as quickly as possible. This is what I was saying back in mid-November, that if that gap doesn't get filled, there's going to be hecticness coming into the market. And definitely we did see some hecticness for the last week or so. So right now we got some good bullish momentum here. My oscillator crossed back up. We got that higher low. We're right on the neckline. We must reclaim 357.75 if you're a bull for this to get up here and fill this gap. I'll come back for you guys tomorrow. It'll be important where that oscillator is, where the price is. We'll know more about where the market is headed for the next remainder of this month. And tomorrow will be a key day to see where that price lies. And I'll come back for you guys tomorrow. Enjoy your evening and good luck trading tomorrow.